Morning. It's 3 minutes after 10 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's also Monday. You probably noticed that already. And I wonder what you did this weekend. I wonder whether you sort of poked your head above parapets that you haven't actually poked your head above for a while, or whether you ventured a little further than perhaps you have done for months in some cases. We did, and it was interesting. It was illustrative. It was informative. And one of the things I was most intrigued by was the differences with which businesses are addressing the challenge of reopening. And I think we'll talk about that a little later in the programme. I'm drawn particularly to the beauty industry, which I wonder whether it has been a victim of invisible misogyny. Actually, I rephrase that slightly because we don't want to turn it into a culture war. I wonder whether the beauty industry has been the victim of a sort of sexism, whereby because there aren't really any women in the in the so-called quad, the four men who are apparently making all the decisions regarding this government, while of course preparing to deny that they bear any responsibility whatsoever for the catastrophe, the carnage and the chaos that continues to cover the country. Cool. Alliterations are up and running early today, aren't they? But I do wonder whether the beauty industry has been somewhat sidelined and also somewhat sort of stifled by the fact that men don't realise how important it can be for half of the population. But beauty and catering, two of my favourite things in the world. I thought we'd look at those, the challenges that your businesses face, but we'll get onto that a little later. This is going to be the weirdest thing, isn't it, for the next couple of years. Reporting the reality of Brexit with this just utter befuddlement at how we let it happen and how those of us who told you what was going to happen still were being ignored, even as the lorry park in Kent was announced by the government. All the people that told you it was Project Fear. It was a van driver that told us, and he rejoices in that title. He's changed his Twitter handle now, old Kieran. Kieran was the first. This is one of the things I love most about the desperate attempt by the liars and the charlatans to pretend that Remainers were somehow out of touch with ordinary working people. My loudest alarm bells for what Brexit was going to mean came from a van driver and a greengrocer. Yeah. Absolute classic examples of the out-of-touch landed gentry. It was a greengrocer who explained to me what would happen with food supply, and it was a van driver who explained to me what would happen when we left the customs union. I remember Kieran citing the border between Ukraine and Poland as an example of what it will or could look like if we didn't wake up fast. But we didn't wake up. We sleepwalked to a place where even Damien Green, former member of Theresa May's cabinet, is complaining in the local paper about the fact that a lorry park, which became necessary the minute we leave the customs union, about 10,000 lorries a day need to be processed. And that former member of Theresa May's cabinet is complaining that it's going to be built in his constituency, a constituency that I think voted about 60% leave. So we'll have a look at that a little later in the programme. I'm trying to find out where Priti Patel got this idea from, that the sweatshops in Leicester hadn't been investigated for fear of accusations of racism. I'm looking at the maiden speech given by one Labour MP in Leicester in January, which called for action immediately. And I'm looking at the diktat that was issued to the Health and Safety Executive in 2011 by this Conservative government, ordering them to cut their inspections of factories and workplaces by about a third immediately. 10 years of cuts. But somehow, and I've looked at Priti Patel's, it appears to have been something she's just made up. Why haven't the Health and Safety Executive, the Home Office, various other government bodies intervened further and faster in the sweatshop scandals in Leicester, which many MPs and local politicians have been shouting about for years? Well, what can we say? What will they swallow on this one as a way of covering our own backsides from epic incompetence, inaction and austerity-related problems? Well, let's just claim that. Can we bring racism into it in any way? And we'll get Priti to do it, because obviously she's well insulated from sort of accusations and allegations that may be levelled at white politicians. Can we get her to sort of claim that it's nothing to do with us and everything to do with those pesky anti-racists? Yeah, we can get her to do that. Ring her now, will you, Dom? I don't phone cabinet ministers, Boris. That's your job. Sorry, boss. I'll ring her immediately. And speaking of Dom, you see the story about how his company gave £250,000 No, 250. No, I'll check the numbers actually before I go any further with that. But the list of companies now that are receiving contracts from this government without apparently having to tender, but with apparently having links to Dominic Cummings, it's becoming almost too long to follow. And I also like the story about companies turning down money to which they are entitled. We said when Rishi Sunak's announcements were made last week that it seemed a little bit odd to offer £1,000 per worker to companies in return for bringing back workers who were going to come back anyway. But there we go, a quick survey of the news. And because the Brexit news is so awful, expect the government to make some announcements about immigration today. That's just how it works. You know that by now, don't you? It's become so flipping obvious and predictable that I almost wonder whether it's worth me telling you that it's going to happen anymore. Appalling Brexit news today. Government will make some meaningless announcements about immigration. OK, I think I'll go home now. I think we've covered. Is that everything, Keith? Have we covered everything in the news? I think we're pretty much done. Should we just play some? Should we put on some Dvorak? Take us up to the 12 o'clock news. I think we're done. I'm only joking. 9 minutes after 10. It was on Friday, believe it or not. Friday morning, 10 a.m. I suggested to you that the failure of the British government the English elements of British government to wear face masks was problematical. Because there is no earthly way you can expect the public to do so if the political leaders are not. And we commented upon how we couldn't think of an occasion upon which Boris Johnson had been photographed with one on. And then, lo and behold, 5 hours later, up he pops in Uxbridge, I think, sort of photographed with a face mask on. And then the suggestion came that there would be a requirement to wear them in shops, akin to the one in Scotland. And then Michael Gove appeared on the telly yesterday suggesting that it shouldn't be a requirement at all. And every angle on this is interesting to me. I find myself drawn once again to the question of whether or not it's deliberate, whether or not the confusion regarding face masks, should you, shouldn't you, will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance? The confusion regarding face masks is the only way that the government will be able at some point subsequent to blame it all on us. Yeah, you know that polling last month showing that in the event of a second spike, a second wave, we've already been sufficiently well groomed to blame it on each other rather than on the people who are actually in charge. And I do wonder with the face mask, and I know this is a little bit tinfoil hatty, I wonder if that'll be next. I have to wear a tinfoil hat in public to stay safe from coronavirus and 5G gamma rays. But the conversation about face masks fascinates me because I would not actually put it past them now. Johnson says one thing, Gove says the other, and then when the proverbial hits the fan, they can both throw their hands up in the air and say, well, it wasn't me. We said black and white, so you can't blame us when things go wrong. I'm not a virologist. It seems to me that countries that have coped with SARS-like viruses extremely well over the years, countries much more familiar with pandemic response, countries largely in Southeast Asia, of course, they love masks. They really love them. South Korea, Japan, they just love them. And they wear them almost without any legal requirements. And they have, 90+% of the population wearing them. And they have a fraction of the deaths that we have. But here's a newspaper columnist with a degree in history telling you that masks have absolutely no medical value whatsoever. Or a former UKIP politician claiming that she caught herpes from hers. And it's quite incredible, really, now, that the madness that engulfs us. And once again, I don't understand why being a passionate supporter of Brexit also makes you likely to be a passionate enemy of face masks. Is it just faith versus facts again? Is it this idea that you can actually, because you can win a referendum with exceptionalism and nonsense, so the idea persists that you could also somehow win a battle with a global pandemic with fact-free, faith-based nonsense. That's all I've got at the moment. How else do you explain why the Venn diagram of people who reject face masks are also people who rejected reality back in 2016? And in many ways, the loudest enemies of face masks were the loudest champions of Brexit. So as Brexit falls apart about their ears, people in Chatham not happy. As Brexit falls apart around their ears, you're going to have to get a passport 4 months in advance of going on holiday if you want to take your dog to the Costa del Sol. You're probably going to need travel insurance, phone roaming charges, probably on the way back in. You're going to need all manner of help if you're exporting. official government advice is you might consider hiring a customs consultant to help you navigate all the red tape that you voted in 2016 to get rid of, but have somehow ended up inviting more into your life. So as all of this falls apart about their ears, you'd think, wouldn't you, that they might sit down and be quiet for a while when it comes to public health, having actually inflicted the biggest, the single biggest episode of voluntary self-harm upon a country that the world has ever seen. You'd think that the same people responsible for that would perhaps observe a period of silence when it comes to poo-pooing public health experts. But no, here's a check from the Daily Telegraph. If you have absolutely no qualifications at all and you want to write an article about complicated science, then you can fill your boots just as you filled your boots for 20 years with regard to global warming. We've learnt nothing. Anyway, how was your weekend? Everybody happy? Hear any good jokes? Did you get to the pub at all? It's 10:14. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. I haven't asked you a question yet, have I? Well, I suppose I should. Let's cut it three ways. Question number one, why has face masks become a topic of controversy? 0345 6060973. And if you're new to the programme and you're thinking, crikey, I'll have to think a bit before I answer that, that's generally how we prefer to do things. Because I know the what of it. I know most of the what's of it. I've been doing my own research on the internet, and not only am I certain that face masks are useless, but also you can catch coronavirus from a 5G mast or something like that. I know that side of it. The bit I don't get is how it's become so front and centre in the public space. And, of course, the problem then becomes none of us really know what to do. So I caught a train from King's Lynn to King's Cross yesterday, and I wore a face mask all the way. And I kept it on as I went through the station, got into a car, a mini cab, and wore my face mask all the way home. And then I was dropping off a friend of my daughter's at her house, and her dad had hysterics when he saw us pull up with face masks on. And I'm like, mate, this is the law. You can't get in. Your TfL won't let you get in a vehicle unless you're wearing a face mask. I was wearing my rather natty THTC one. And lo and behold, I looked ridiculous to someone who is intelligent, informed, and engaged. And at that point, I find myself thinking, is this deliberate? Is the face masks the latest thing on the list of have official policy of confusion from the very top of the Downing Street Christmas tree, and then they can somehow wash their hands of responsibility when things go wrong? Give it a week, and the failure of the country to properly understand guidance on face masks will probably be blamed by Boris Johnson on the care homes. And then he'll stand up in PMQs and claim that he said nothing of the sort, and half of the country will tub their forelock, doff their cap, and swallow another bunch of lies from the government that today is spending hundreds of millions of pounds to tell us that actually back in 2016 we were lying and all those people we call Project Fear were telling the truth. And if anyone's got a spare 10 minutes before we head towards the first break of the morning, phone lines are open. Hit them now. Face masks, face masks, face masks. After 10, sometimes, the more complicated my introduction, the more effectively it can be completely popped by a single sentence. Amin writes, the problem is, James, that if they're a good idea now, then they were also a good idea then. Then being the point at which our politicians were queuing up, and various self-appointed experts in the media were queuing up to tell us that they were a waste of time. So is that why? Is that why they can't just give us really strong guidance on this? It may even have something to do with Sadiq Khan. I know he gets the blame for everything from certain quarters of the country, but on this occasion, perhaps the fact that he was calling for face masks so loudly and so early means that the government are reluctant to turn around and call for face masks loudly and lately, because it would involve implicitly saying, sorry, Sadiq, you were right and we were wrong. Yeah, nice preparation for Brexit. 21 minutes after 10 is the time. David is in Bermondsey. David, what's going on?
Morning, James.
Hello.
I think it's fairly simple in my eyes. There's two reasons for it. Firstly, I think face masks remind people there's a serious pandemic going on. And the government don't want you to keep thinking about that. They want to think about the future being all rosy and happy.
I like this, because already I find myself leaping to the defence of the government. I mean, stay alert. All of the messaging from them is that we're still, a lot of people are in lockdown. You can't walk up the street without seeing that the country is still in a state of stasis, whatever the correct word, stagnation. There we go. I'm all for a little bit of government bashing, but I don't think that they want us to forget that there's a pandemic on, do they?
I think they've been being dragged all the way through where they've not wanted to go. Slow lockdown, not wanting to close the airports, not wanting to do face masks, but Khan and Sturgeon have put it front and centre. The science.
All right, I'll meet you halfway. They don't want us to forget about the pandemic. That would be silly. But what they do want us to forget about is how appallingly they've handled it in the past. And the mask, as in America, is potentially a symbol of how wrong they have been for so long.
Exactly. And I think the fact that you saw Trump and Boris wearing them at the same time when they've both been against him all this time is not coincidence.
No, again, David, mate, this is outrageous. I gallop once again to the defence of Boris Johnson. Hang on, clippity-clop, clippity-clop, clippity-clop.
It's a bad habit.
He hasn't been against them, has he? Or has he? Oh, well, maybe he has. But not actually against them. He's probably been ambivalent about them.
I've been I'm a Labour Party member, and I've been actually a bit critical of Keir Starmer not wearing them. Because if your politicians aren't wearing them, people aren't going to think you need to wear them. So the lack of wearing them is a choice they're making. So if they're not following the science, which they're not, there has to be something else going on.
OK, so that explains the government. And what about the followers? It might well be the same answer, but I saw some of the usual sort of desiccated cheerleaders for everything Boris Johnson says or does, claiming that they don't like face masks or they feel oppressed by face masks. One former prominent UKIP politician claimed she'd caught herpes from her face mask this weekend, which is biologically impossible but comedically magnificent. Why are they so sceptical of face masks?
I would love to know that answer, because I was driving up on the M1, going to see my mum for the first time in 6 months. So I was the only person wearing a face mask in a service station of a couple of hundred people, including staff who were serving food. And I was just like, oh.
They don't have to wear masks, the staff serving food.
Should,
well, yes, except that depending on where they are, they will be having their temperatures taken when they get to work, and they'll be having tests, you see. So some are. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Some are. So again, that's a problem, because you can go into one establishment and behind the scenes, an establishment I went to this weekend, behind the scenes, they are moving heaven and earth to ensure that their staff are healthy. All the sort of spot checks that you'd expect. You go into another establishment, at first glance it looks exactly the same, but go through the green baize door, go into the kitchen or go into the moment in the morning when all the staff arrive, and they're actually observing completely different regimes. You and me have got no way of knowing. So I'm glad you didn't know the answer to my second question, because it would have been unfortunate for phone-in purposes to have every mystery solved before we got to the 10:30 news. It's perfectly arguable. There was a brilliant thread a while ago about how masks in America were a symbol of Trump's failure, and that is why he has moved so reluctantly to wear one. I presume he was told he couldn't go into a hospital unless he wore one this weekend. He was visiting injured soldiers in a hospital. I know what you're thinking, haven't they suffered enough? But he hasn't yet mastered the bit about getting it over his nose, so it was pointless him having one on at all, because his big nose was still exposed. But hey-ho, baby steps for the president. And in Britain, I wonder whether it is actually somehow similar. So why would a former UKIP politician claim that her face mask had given her herpes unless there was an opposition to the face mask that was actually true? I mean, her real reason for not liking face masks would be, well, it makes it impossible for me to pretend that Boris Johnson has the first idea what he's doing. And at the moment, that's with Brexit falling apart, that's quite important for these people. I don't know, just thinking out loud, which is what you are welcome to do by dialing 0345 6060 973. Cab's in Cambridge. Cab, what would you like to say?
Hey up, James.
Hello, mate.
So I've missed a bit of the programme. I've just phoned in, having heard the last couple of calls.
I've only been on for 26 minutes. What the hell have you been doing?
Sorry,
What do you mean, sorry? Sorry's not good enough. Do you think I'm here for my own amusement?
Yes, I kind of do.
Oh, however, yeah. No, very good point. Carry on. What would you like to say?
Well, if you look at the sort of Venn diagram of people who object to face masks and really viscerally object to them, and compare that with people who voted Brexit, look at who's making a fuss about it, it's not a full circle. But
no, it's not. Of course it's not.
And if you ask yourself what these two things have in common, it comes down to emotional intelligence and emotional maturity.
Do you think so?
The understanding that doing something yourself is got an impact on all of those around you, and you can't just do things that viscerally feel right is something that's sort of lacking in both. And I think it's really as simple as that. The government don't want to make this mandatory. They don't want a clear message because it will upset that diaspora of voters who voted Brexit, who are...
Why would it? Why would the government coming out now and saying, like the Scottish government have done, if you're indoors in a potentially crowded place, a shop or... I mean, pubs are more of a problem in my humble, but, of course, you can't drink and eat while you're wearing a face mask. You can write that down if you want, Cab. It's a coruscating insight. That's why people tune in every morning. But so in pubs and restaurants, the problem is probably more acute. But why can't the English government, why can't Westminster just follow Scotland and say you need to wear a face mask in shops?
Because as soon as you do that, the same columnists who are making a fuss about getting a cold sore because a face mask somehow gave you herpes, a virus that you didn't catch snogging someone years ago.
Yes.
Those same columnists are going to be having a go at them. They're going to be criticising them.
Why though, Cab? Why? I mean, I'm a student. I'm a student of these vampires.
Because the same reason that they believe that blue passports are important. The same. No.
You're doing it. You haven't. I mean, I understand the context and the backdrop. But the question, I mean, if they came out now and said, as Boris Johnson seemed pretty close to saying on Saturday or Friday, they just simply said, in shops, put a face mask on.
The thing is, it's a trivial inconvenience. It is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It isn't as nice as not wearing one. And that is sufficient for somebody coming from that perspective to have a visceral reaction.
I refuse to be in any way discomforted or inconvenienced because I am English and I rule the waves.
It's not even a direct refusal. It's the fact that they lack the emotional capacity to get over the inconvenience and actually do the right thing. They lack the empathy to be able to see that this is better for everyone if done universally and done properly. And it's the same thing we often see. You remember when smoking was banned in pubs?
Yes.
Because it's better for everybody if people who work there and people who want to go in aren't poisoned by those around them. You remember that, and you remember how people refused to react to go along with it, and how angry people
actually,
were.
I'm probably a little younger than you realise, Cab, in that, but I do I mean, I also, anecdotally, I've been reading about people who objected to seatbelts becoming compulsory, and so it is that same... It'd be interesting to see the crossover, wouldn't it, between people who objected to the smoking ban in pubs on the grounds that giving people cancer is not great. The people who objected to compulsory seatbelts on the grounds of flying through your windscreen and landing in a bloody pulp is not great. And the people who object to wearing face masks on the grounds that spreading virus-ridden microbes all over the shop is not great.
I'll bet you a pound to a penny that Venn diagram is also a near circle. It's nearly all over that.
You might be right.
It's a concept of emotional maturity.
I know. I like the phrase emotional maturity. I wonder, and this isn't a criticism of you. It would be very pot kettle if it was. I wonder if we can find a slightly less condescending way of phrasing it. 0345 60 60973. Obviously, we've stressed several times that not everybody who is who voted to leave would be opposed to face masks, but as with the furiously harder thinking, you can never stress it enough. Here's one. As so often happens with your rude and sweeping generalisations about Brexit voters, you are wrong yet again. I voted leave, yet I am completely in support of face masks for all. So me saying, of course not everybody who voted leave is going to be opposed to face masks. It was a bit too complicated for you to understand, and you claim that we're insulting your intelligence. Oh, go on, give me a hug. Come on. It's 10:30. Thomas Watts has the headlines. Is the time, and I just sort of do find myself thinking it's important. If you think I'm wrong, then do let me know. I'm trying to obviously cheer you up a bit at the moment, despite the news being so bleak. The alternative, of course, is to pretend that reality isn't reality, and then to complain about people being negative. That's going to be big in the coming year. Probably by 2021, that'll be our new national sport, accusing people of negativity for pointing at things and saying, look, a thing I told you was going to happen. It's happened. I'll take your calls later. I'll take your calls of apology from Kent, now that this massive lorry park, the Farage Garage, is being built right on your doorstep, despite them swearing blind it wouldn't be. I will accept your apologies later in the programme for the rudeness that you inflicted upon me when I told you it would have to happen if we left the customs union, and it wasn't my knowledge that led me to that conclusion. It was those pesky experts that Michael Gove told you not to listen to. 10:35 is the time. Face masks. How have they become controversial? And let me just read you, in case you think I'm exaggerating, let me just read you this news report. Ministers are facing demands to explain whether face coverings must be worn in English shops after the Cabinet Office Minister, Michael Gove, said they would not be mandatory. On Friday, the Prime Minister and government sources indicated the coverings could become mandatory, as Boris Johnson suggested the need for a stricter approach. However, Gove said yesterday they would not be mandatory and the public should use their... fill in the gaps. What is the most fatuous, pointless, hollow, meaningless, dangerous, dodgy slogan that you could insert at this point? Instead of having clear guidance from government on issues of public health, you should use your dustbuster. No, common sense. There it is again. 10:36 is the time. Sam is in Essex. Sam, what's going on?
Hello, mate. How you doing?
All good. Confused, actually. Why are people upset about masks now?
Well, to be honest, I don't really know.
Oh.
I'm upset about masks because I've actually got a big beard,
right.
and a mask really upsets my beard.
Yes.
That's not what.
Well, at least you haven't caught herpes like the UKIP woman, mate. You should count your lucky stars.
Absolutely. No, I work in the construction industry. I'm a health and safety manager in the construction industry,
yes.
and trying to find masks to do the work that they're supposed to be doing in masks anyway is impossible at the moment.
Still
really
supply
hard.
Issues.
Yeah, not of the very specific, like the FFP3 mask.
Right. Okay. Yes.
That they have to wear for dust inhalation and the face fit testing stuff.
Yes.
Is all quite difficult to find. But the thing that I'm finding that upsets me more is that when people say, it's against my human rights to make me wear a mask.
Do people say that? Is that the thing? Is it human rights? Because you're a health and safety professional. It's usually health and safety and human rights that go hand in hand in things we want less of. What do you want? Fewer rights. What do you want? Less health, less safety. That is the direction of traffic, but I haven't heard the human rights argument yet on this one.
No, well, a lot of people are like, you can't make me do this. You can't make me wear a mask.
Right.
But if I were running a shop, for example, the government don't have to make it mandatory for you to wear a mask.
Yeah.
The shop could do that.
Yes.
If it's against your,
you're not coming in.
If you don't want to wear a mask, then go and shop somewhere else. Like, that's not going to set up a great business model, I'd imagine.
Well, I don't know it, but I mean, I would go in much more likely actually than I would. But I wonder if we've just stumbled on the problem here, when actually you can't. If you're I've worked in shops. And I quite like the retail world. I liked working in shops, but it's not my job. I was always very keen to chase shoplifters when I worked in River Island, but the manager was very, very keen for me not to chase shoplifters in case the shoplifter I was chasing up Worcester High Street turned around and stabbed me. And we had some heated exchanges about. I don't know why. I think I just got a little bit bored. I wasn't particularly fond of protecting River Island's profits. I just quite like the idea of running around Worcester for an hour on top of my lunch break. But it's not the job of a shop worker to do you see what I mean? You walk in without your mask on, and my mum worked behind the makeup counter on Estee Lauder for 20 years. It's not her flipping job to order you, some big galoofing bearded buffoon who's refusing to wear a mask. It's not her job to make you wear a mask, and if it's not her job, whose job is it?
No, absolutely. Well, but I was in Cambridge the other. Well, I live on kind of the Essex-Cambridge border.
Oh yeah.
And I was in Cambridge the other day, and I was walking into Debenhams, and the gentleman, there was a security gentleman standing on the door, making sure people were coming in and out the right way, but also kind of making sure that people were sanitising their hands on the way in.
Yes.
Now they're obviously paying him to stand there and make sure that A, there are enough people, or there are not too many people in the store, and B, that everyone sanitises their hands when they come in. It wouldn't be beyond the realms of impossible to say, okay, let's add a face mask to that guy's job and say, if you're not wearing a face mask, I'm really sorry, but we're not permitting you in the store. Or if you don't have a face mask, you can buy one for £1 here, touch your card here, and it will charge you £1 to your, or whatever the nominal fee may be for a face mask.
I mean, it should be straightforward. As a health and safety professional, you must be having a particularly interesting time of it at the moment, Sam, as you look around and see, and really what you try to impose upon a single building site, we need to see imposed upon an entire nation, and there's a little bit of shortage of leadership on this one, isn't there?
for me, it does. It is very difficult because of the kind of I listen to you quite a lot, and as we talk about the lack of clarity here, like there, it's quite literally clear as mud. And generally speaking, there are lots of guidelines, and there are lots of. I mean, the Health and Safety, the Construction Leadership Council actually has put a pretty decent document together, and they update it regularly on what construction sites should be doing. And my employer has actually taken me on. Unfortunately, he took me on in January,
right.
Not knowing that there was going to be a global pandemic. But I've paid my wages 3 times in the amount of COVID-19 stuff that I've done over the last couple of months.
Talk about putting in a shift. Can I make a suggestion, mate? Don't get offended or anything, because I know you're working very hard and you've got all your exams and everything. Have you thought of just telling everyone to use their common sense and leaving them to it?
Well, I often do that, That's one of my most sound pieces of advice. If all else fails, you know what, mate? Just use your common sense. You'll be fine. And then they can't blame me, right?
They can't come back. They can't come back to you. So there's a fella over there wearing a face mask. There's a fella over there wearing a Donald Duck mask. One of them. They both use their common sense. It's nothing to do with Sam. Don't come crying to Sam if you get a terrible disease or you get intubated. It's your own fault for not using your common sense. Thank you, mate. 10:41. Robert is in Hong Kong, where, there's a lot going on in Hong Kong, but we are, for the moment at least, Robert, talking about face masks.
Yeah, well, hello, James.
Hello, mate.
We've all seen people from East Asia in London wearing face masks kind of obsessively. People laugh at them.
Yeah, well, not anymore.
Here, I know, China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, everybody wears them obsessively. And guess what?
What? The
virus is completely under control. It's obvious that the face mask is extremely important in controlling this virus.
So where does it come from then? Where does it? Let me read you some suggestions. Here's a good one from Kate. The masks are being interpreted as a visual expression of opinion rather than an expression of common sense. For some reason, it's turned into you're wearing one and I'm not. Therefore, you're judging me, and people hate being judged. I mean, there's some sense in that, and in the absence of a better answer, I'll take whatever I'm given. But why do you think in Hong Kong it's a no-brainer, and here? It's another battlefield between facts and feelings. Again, 4 years after the mother of all battles between facts and feelings, here we are again arguing about face masks. The same people, largely, not entirely.
Well, I think that the authorities in America and Britain are so idiotic and arrogant that they think they've got nothing to learn from anybody else. And all they have to do is look to the east and see the places where it's being well controlled. And they can see that the masks work, but they're too stupid to do that. They think, no, we've got to come to our own conclusions. We've got to make our own mistakes and kill loads of people in the process.
Or even worse, they don't think they will make mistakes because that old exceptionalism, which has been endemic really in the upper echelons of right-wing politics on both sides of the Atlantic for the last 5 years, has kicked in. Do you know, you say that, and sometimes I would have put the brakes on myself then, but I saw a tweet this weekend from a blue-ticked American politician. I think he's a state congressman rather than a national congressman. It was a picture of Donald Trump wearing a mask, and it said, "I don't wear masks, but only Donald Trump can look so masculine in one." And I clicked on this fella's profile because I think David Baddiel picked it up and joked about it. And so I clicked on his profile, and it actually said on his profile, this is an elected politician with a verified account, he said, "I believe in American exceptionalism." So sometimes I throw these little lines out there thinking 60% comedy, 40% fear. And they get thrown back at me by men like him with 100% fact stamped on it. They really do think that somehow being American and believing in stuff is a valid strategy for dealing with a global pandemic. How many people... What happens in Hong Kong if you're not wearing a mask?
People glare at you and they won't let you on a minibus or...
So a mixture of public, a mixture of public solidarity and some authority or legislation. Because I think it was in Catalonia that as of Friday, everybody over 5 not wearing a mask in public gets hit with a €100 fine. And listen, the bit that I struggle with, thank you, Robert, take care. I'm sure we'll talk again about other Hong Kong related matters. But the bit I struggle with is this, right? It is, if you wear glasses, it's a little bit irritating, okay? Possibly very irritating. But I got on the train in King's Lynn yesterday. It's an hour and 40 minutes to King's Cross. I walked through King's Cross, got in a car, half an hour home. I wore a mask for the entire journey, and after 10 minutes of being on the train, I'd not noticed it. If it turns out to be belt and braces, as they say, if it turns out, which is, I think, now highly, highly, highly unlikely, if it turns out that they don't help, what have I lost? 0345 6060 973. And don't say, there is one downside, James. You could catch herpes. It's 10:46. 49 is the time. I wonder if it's this simple, okay? So we're examining today why the government is simultaneously talking about making face masks mandatory and not making face masks mandatory. And you will remember that the official guidance a couple of months ago, or 2 or 3 months ago, was that face masks made no difference at all. It was people like Sadiq Khan and others who were standing up and saying, well, actually, the guidance everywhere else in the world is that they are. But here's the thing. Do you remember when it became clear, something else we suggested was probably the case on this programme, when they were talking about following the science, and the more we looked at PPE, and tests, actually, testing capacity, the more we wondered whether they were actually following the size of the stockpiles, and it was the lack of equipment that was actually informing the policy telling us that we didn't need the equipment. I really think this, if there is ever an inquiry, and if it ever finds its way out of the drawer where the Russia report remains locked tightly, I do think that's crucial. The guidance was based upon the absence of equipment. So when they're saying, do you need this equipment, they'd say, have we got any? Then they get told, no, we haven't got any. And then they tell us, oh, you don't need any of that stuff that we haven't got. And then when we got it, when we actually managed to get hold of stuff, despite a few errors, like dropping a few million quid on some Turkish shyster who sent over a load of gear that was unfit for purpose, Derek Trotter, his Turkish cousin, when that happened and we got some kit together, then they started telling us that we did actually need the kit, or we did actually need to test. So presumably that explains some of the contradictions in what the chief medical officer or the chief scientific advisors, or those, remember when we had those press conferences and they'd say face masks do not make any major difference. What they were really saying is we haven't got any face masks. So I thought Sadiq Khan had lost the plot when he sat here saying make your own, tie a bandana around your neck, wear a but what are the masks that most of us are wearing now but glorified bandanas? Let's talk to a doctor. He doesn't practice much anymore. He's too busy writing astonishingly best-selling books, or in this case, editing them. I speak, of course, of Adam Kay, who has edited a rather lovely volume called Dear NHS, 100 Stories to Say Thank You. I suppose, in the spirit of Ron Seal, Adam, I don't really need to ask you what the book is about, because it does exactly what it says on the tin.
It almost does. 109 people are in it, unfortunately, due to too many people saying
fake news. Fake news. Yeah. Hashtag fake news. Sorry. So they'd already done the cover art, had they? By the time they came up with 100 stories.
Yeah, well, 109 just sounded a bit mad. It's like when you invite guests to a wedding.
Yes. You expect a few to say no.
Yeah. Well, my one, I expected most of them to say no. But I think it just speaks to our love for the NHS and the fact that whoever we are, we've all relied on it, that so many people did say yes.
Yes, and it is. I mean, it's a veritable who's who of the great and the good. There's somebody here from everybody, whether it's sort of Louis Theroux or Emma Thompson, Pam Ayres, Joanna Lumley, Marion Keyes, Peter Capaldi, Jamie Oliver is in there, Bridget Christie, Frankie Boyle, Stuart Lee, E.L. James, Marina Hyde, Josh Widdicombe, Chris Evans, Victoria Derbyshire. I'm beginning to wonder why I wasn't invited to contribute to this volume, Adam Kay.
Oh, this is awkward, isn't it?
See, this is why we don't get many guests on the show. They can't deal with the tough questions. Perhaps it was lost in the post.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. If Paul McCartney said no,
that was it. I was on standby. Yeah. McCartney said no. Ringo Bryan. Just give people a reason why they should read it, because it is absolutely lovely, but also, of course, important.
I can give a very good reason, which is every single drop of profit goes to NHS Charities Together and to the Lullaby Trust, who support families bereaved of young children. I think we do need to say thank you to the NHS. I'm not saying that's instead of adequately funding it, but I think they've had such a rotten few months, and buy it for charity, buy it to say thank you, or buy it to just pry into the private medical stories of celebrities.
Well, that's what it is, isn't it? Everybody giving, with varying degrees, as you say, of revelation, everybody giving their own memories of and gratitude to the NHS. You mentioned Paul McCartney. I didn't know his mum was a nurse. She became a sister on an NHS ward, later a midwife. So, as he says, my feelings about the NHS are obvious. It's a fantastic institution. And that's just one example of the kind of mixture of anecdote and testimony, isn't it, that the book contains?
Yes, and I think it's quite a surprising book. There's lots of things that I didn't expect, didn't realise. Graham Norton, right at the start of the book, talks about coming to London as a drama student in 1998 on a night out, getting stabbed, and like properly life-threateningly stabbed, losing half his blood volume, banging on doors, hoping someone would answer and phone an ambulance, and having just moved from another country from where his family was, describing the NHS as this safety net that just scooped him up, which is exactly what it does. And that's one of the themes that comes through. Another theme is what a great thing we have compared to, say, America. Stanley Tucci talking about his experiences of both. Stephen Fry talking about being so incensed at hearing a sort of a far-right drone-in radio station in the States talking about socialised healthcare that he phoned up himself.
Oh, really?
And said,
I haven't read that
this,
one yet.
Socialised doesn't mean bad. You've got a socialised military.
Yes.
Which I thought was a great analogy.
It is a brilliant analogy, actually. I might dig that audio out and play it, actually. That sounds just like something for the archives. And obviously every story is different, but Malala Yousaf, famously shot by the Taliban for having the audacity to suggest that women should be educated. Her perspective is particularly interesting because the NHS is so completely at odds with what was her normal back in Pakistan.
Yes, I think if some good is going to come out of this terrible crisis we're in and we've been in for the last few months and will continue to be, and I suspect for a while yet, I hope it reminds us what an amazing thing we have in the NHS. And if, in the coming years, there are threats to its very existence, then I hope people more than ever would get to their feet and defend it, because it's very precious.
Beautifully put, Adam Kay. Before you go, you mentioned the continuing catastrophe, which engulfs us all. We're in the middle of a phone-in about face masks. Do you understand why they've become a battleground?
I find it very confusing. Yeah. I wear a face mask, and I wear a face mask to protect other people.
Yeah, but you're just a fully qualified doctor, mate. It's not like you used to be in UKIP.
It's very different. It feels quite American in a way. It feels a bit gun lobby in some abstract way. People's sort of objections to it, which don't stand up to anything.
Except to the test of how dare you tell me what to do, how dare you tell me what to do, kind of thing, even if it's don't jump off that cliff.
Yeah, you're spot on. And we are wearing them to protect other people, not ourselves. If everyone wears them, then everyone else is protected. And this R0, the R8 will drop because it cannot transmit if no one's breathing it on other people, essentially. They are important. The virus behaves predictably. It's always behaved predictably, and it will always behave predictably in every country in the world. We can compare our country to other countries. Yes. There's not something magical and special about it just because of the Union Jack.
How dare you?
Wear a Union Jack face mask if that makes you feel better.
Keith, get the Tower of London on line 2. Tell them to clear a cell for Adam Kay, will you? We can't have this kind of treachery on the radio. Rule Britannia. Britannia waives the rules. You've caught up with the rewrite, haven't you, of that famous song? Before you go, drawing upon you, I know it's a while since you were in hospital, but you may remember Suzanne Evans. I think she was the leader of UKIP for 10 minutes.
Yes.
She claimed yesterday...
She got herpes from it.
Yes. Is that now, medically speaking, how likely is that?
I mean, if seconds previously someone with herpes was licking her mask,
yes,
I suspect it's possible. Otherwise, I think she needs to look further afield.
You heard it here first. Adam Kay, the editor of Dear NHS. The title of the book is 100 Stories to Say Thank You, but don't judge a book by its cover, as they say, because there's actually 109 stories. And Adam won't mind, well, I'm sure he won't mind me telling you that his own books, the books what he wrote, are still dominating the bestsellers lists. This is going to hurt, and what was it, The Night Before Christmas, Adam? The night
Christmas.
Night shift. The night shift before Christmas. Yeah, no, I just